Lee, I was talking to an Ayurvedic doctor out here in India, and he mentioned in one of the research papers he would have read that when we talk about our bowel movements, every day when we go for cleansing, we are not getting 100% cleansed. It's not 100% bowel movement happening within our body. 5%, 10% always sort of stays back within our intestines, and it sort of builds up. So is that somewhere or the other also contributing towards the IBS and leads to obesity and does it also have to do something with the IBS?
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, again, it comes back to, the type IBS-D or IBS-C, right? So in constipation, people can go for weeks without having any bowel movement whatsoever, right?
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
And well, that's clearly going, to have an effect on the gut, right? If they're not passing any stools for weeks, that's going to become very uncomfortable. I mean, the other thing to just touch on really, which is again another issue, is the gut flora, the bacteria that live within the gut. And within IBS, typically we find a condition called dysbiosis, which is a disturbance within the gut flora. And more evidence is coming to light about the importance of gut bacteria just in general health, right? I mean, in supporting the immune system, in supporting digestion, and so on and so on. And, with, I guess, the wide application of antibiotics, typically prescribed for lots of bacterial infections, that has an effect on the gut flora. So by increasing the amount of probiotics within the diet to encourage the growth of good bacteria, and eating fiber and other prebiotics which support the growth of gut flora, that can be beneficial. But this is gradual, right? It's not kind of take probiotics for a week and suddenly everything. This is kind of a long effect. And there's other research about eating a wide variety of different plant-based products, because your gut flora need they need those wide variety plant to really flourish. And then but that creates problems for people with IBS, because these certain plants can irritate the gut, and it becomes this kind of catch 22, right? I've got to do things that increase the growth of gut flora, yet the foods that are going to support that irritate the gut, and it becomes kind of a catch 22, and they go around in circles. But to answer your question, if they're not passing regularly and completely, that can irritate the gut.
Again, no, Lee, you mentioned about that the diet that we're having and the food we are eating does have a connection with the origination of IBS in an individual. Recently, we have seen a lot of processed and refrigerated foods coming into our lives. Like, if I talk about India, we were primarily vegan, or not vegan, but exactly vegetarian. We used to have a lot more vegetarian-based diet. Even in the US and UK, if non-vegetarian diets were being consumed, they were fresh meat that was coming in picture. It wasn't refrigerated like it is today. Do you think that these processed and refrigerated foods, and again, in order to have more yield, we see a lot of chemicals being infused into the different animals, plants out there to help us get faster access to the raw materials we need for making our food? Does
Mm.
all of this is a vicious cycle that we are getting into, and finally it's having an impact on the overall digestion system of the human beings?
I think it's a really interesting question you ask. I think more research, needs to be carried out in this area. I'm a hypnotherapist first and foremost, right? So I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a doctor. All these kind of questions, I encourage my clients to go and, questions about that kind of thing, then I encourage them to go and speak to a dietitian, and to have them analyze their diet and see how much kind of ultra processed food they're eating, and increase whole grain, as you say, right, fresh foods, and so on and so on. But I think modern diet, we are seeing an increase in IBS, and it wouldn't be surprising if there was a connection, to ultra processed foods, and the use of additives and chemicals within the diet, and what effect that has on the gut bacteria, right? I mean, I think it's definitely an area that should be explored. Whether or not, there is a connection or not, I think it needs to be evidence based, and I think we need to look closely at that, and gain, the amount of sugar that's added to food, especially processed sugars and fats that are added to it. I like to work on the basis that, if you put in good quality fuel into any machine, right, that machine is going to work efficiently, right?
Yeah.
Just as a basic principle, right? If you put low quality fuel into a system, then I'm not sure the system is going to work that effectively. As I said, I'm not a dietitian, and I wouldn't want to give someone, the advice that I'm not trained to give, really.
Yeah, that's the very nice analogy to put across, Lee, that the quality of fuel that we are putting in is gonna, depend the longevity of the machine as well out there. Awesome, awesome. Let's also try to understand a bit on, can a perception of stress actually influence IBS systems? And can you also throw some light on the concept of mind-body amplification in IBS?
Yeah, I mean, stress is a major component
Mhm.
within IBS. I may have said this earlier, that the source of IBS may have started in a stressful event, right? But the whole issue of IBS, the whole disorder of it can be stressful, right? If you're constantly thinking about, where's the toilet, whether I eat this, am I going to feel worse after it? That is stress inducing, right? And because of that, your body tends to go into fight or flight response, right? So if you're living in a constant state of anxiety, you're typically inducing what is referred to as the fight or flight response. So you've got elevated levels of adrenaline, elevated levels of cortisol, those kind of hormones within the body, which activate your sympathetic nervous system, right? So within the nervous system, you've got kind of two broad divisions. You've got the parasympathetic, acts as a bit like a brake. We sometimes refer to it as the rest and digest system. And then you've got the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight response. So people that, are suffering with IBS tend to be, experiencing elevated sympathetic nervous system response. And within hypnotherapy, what we're activating is an increase in parasympathetic nervous system response, right? We're helping the gut do what it's supposed to do, right? Because if you stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, the gut comes online, right? So it gives it time to digest food. The muscle within the gut is relaxed, and it can, carry out what is known as peristalsis, move through the gut. So, stress is a central component, and the hypnotherapy, is very good at alleviating the symptoms of anxiety and stress. I mean, I wouldn't want to say that all stress is bad, because we need stress in our lives, right?
Mhm.
Stress is a necessary. If you didn't have any stress, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, right? But
Yep.
it's when stress becomes problematic, it turns itself into anxiety. And hypnotherapy, you talked about the mind-body connection, but so, I refer to it as the gut-brain axis. So there's a major communication line that runs from the brain to the gut called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve allows the gut to talk to the brain and the brain to talk to the gut. So the nervous system, the gut has its own nervous system referred to as the enteric nervous system. And pretty much the gut can work independently, completely independently of kind of brain input, right? I mean, yes, okay, the brain can have an input, but the gut can do its job on its own. It has all the nervous system it needs. And so, if the gut is experiencing some kind of issue, some kind of problem, it's not in a good state, it's going to communicate to the brain via the vagus nerve. It's going to be sending, information up to the brain to say things aren't working properly. And if the brain is kind of saying, well, things aren't going well at the moment, things are very stressful, then that's going to communicate back down to the gut, and the gut's going to gut function is going to be suppressed whilst the brain tries to figure out how it resolves that stressful event. So, we get this two-way communication. And hypnotherapy allows the brain to communicate in an effective way with the gut. So, within IBS, we carry out a type of hypnotherapy called gut-directed hypnotherapy. So it's very much about using metaphor, positive language to restore gut function. And it's very effective, right? Because the brain and the gut has its own communication system called the vagus nerve, right? So when the brain is thinking, when a person is thinking positive thoughts about gut function, the gut is relaxed, that is communicated down to the gut, right? I mean, it's amazing, right? What just the power of thought does. That mind-body connection is hardwired into us, right? It is hardwired, and hypnotherapy kind of exploits that communication channel.
So, Ali, help me understand. You mentioned about where IBS has led to people leaving their careers, leaving their jobs, and that's not something what anybody would want. But we also understand that with the modern day lifestyle we are looking at, the work environments can be quite stressful. There are certain designations which people have earned over the years, where it is 16 hours of work, 18 hours of work at times, and it can be very, very stressful. So what strategies can organizations put in place to make a more gut friendly work environment for employees suffering with IBS?
It would be good to see workplaces that recognize the impact of stress and anxiety, and how it can affect the body, especially IBS. So I think, so a lot of the things that I do, is help people, access, that state of relaxation. Now, and there's, there obviously clearly is a hypnotherapy, but there are other things such as mindfulness. I mean, yoga, meditation, all of these things are helpful in calming the mind and activating that kind of parasympathetic nervous system, because that's essentially what we're aiming to do, right? Is to increase parasympathetic nervous system activity to allow the gut time just to restore that natural balance. So having areas where people can just step away from the workplace, find some solitude. It could be as simple as some natural space, with trees, a garden, something like that, which is peaceful, where there's some nature, and people can just sit quietly and focus on their breathing. Because one of the surprising benefit for meditation is to focus on breathing, right? And lots of studies have shown how just allowing the breath to become rhythmic, allowing a longer out breath than an in breath. So one of the techniques is often called ratio breathing, where people will count to 5 to breathe in and 7 to breathe out. And doing that on a regular basis, it's very beneficial, right? It calms a lot of bodily systems. And just doing simple breathing exercises, or taking just regular breaks where they can just sit, practice some mindfulness or some meditation, would definitely help in the workplace, I think. Working for 16 hours in a very stressful environment, if eventually, in a lot of people, will result in some kind of bodily disorder, whether it be IBS, whether it be migraines, whether it be whatever it is, right? I mean, lots of people do find that it takes its toll on the body.